Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
I'm Bill Dries with the Daily Memphian. We record this Monday, June 10th, 2024. We are joined by Shelby County Elections Administrator Linda Phillips, and this is On the Record. We're a month, as this airs as part of a story in the Daily Memphian, 1 month from the July 12th start of early voting ahead of the August 1st election day. Linda, let's start with some other dates. If I am not a registered voter in Shelby County, how long do I have to register to vote here?
Well, you need to register by Tuesday, July the 2nd. If you're doing it in person, our office is open from 8 to 4:30. If you're mailing it in, it needs to be postmarked on July 2nd. And if you're doing it online, you can do it up till midnight on the 2nd and be registered in time for the election.
Okay. And again, because I think that at your office, you often see people who maybe already registered to vote here, who maybe have the idea that you have to register for each election and you don't, right?
No. Once you're registered, your registration is permanent. You need to keep your address updated, but you can do that at any early voting location.
Okay. You have been taking requests to vote absentee since May 3rd. How's that going? And are the absentee voting requests a pretty stable number, or does it depend on the election cycle?
Well, the bulk of the absentee requests come from our overseas and military voters. And then those people who are on the permanent absentee list, those are fairly constant. Because most students won't have gone, they're still at home on August 1st, haven't gone back to college. They typically will vote in person in August if they're going to vote.
Right. And in the case of absentee voting, if you're not active military, if you're in any other kind of absentee voter, that is for each election, right?
Right, yes. Unless you're a military voter, you need to ask for an application for absentee ballot for each election. And typically, the numbers are pretty stable in August. They'll go up quite a bit in November, but typically we have about 1,200 in August.
Okay. And I take it that the increase in absentee is what you see across the board for the presidential general election, which is our most popular election cycle in terms of turnout, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I would expect that we'll have about 65% of the voters turn out in November, which is, about double of any other election. Right.
And in taking a look at the Election Commission's list of voter turnout from past elections in this election cycle, it shows that the turnout for this election cycle 4 years ago was 19.1%, 15% in 2016, and 22.7% in 2012. So better than the March presidential primaries, but below the presidential general election in November. So I'm wondering, is the story behind turnout that voters either aren't tuned into what's coming up or don't care, or care by degrees depending on what's on the ballot when it comes to this election?
Well, I think most voters take a look at, and decide to vote if they think their vote's going to make a difference. And, there's some important races on the August ballot. I mean, it is the primary ballot, and there are some contested primary races on both Republican and Democratic. But then on the general election ballot, people that live within the Memphis-Shelby County School District have school board members to elect. And I think we can all agree that school board is a terribly important job. And I think more voters really need to come out and make their opinions heard.
Right. And that is 5 of the 9 seats on the Memphis Shelby County Schools Board. Let's give people a rundown here. We have a single countywide general election for General Sessions Court Clerk on the August ballot, judicial races in Bartlett and Germantown, races for mayor, alderman, and school board positions in Arlington. Also state and federal primaries led by the U.S. Senate primaries, congressional primaries in the 8th and 9th districts here in Shelby County, and primaries for the Tennessee legislature, 2 statewide retention races for a position on the Tennessee Supreme Court and another position on the State Court of Criminal Appeals, as well as 5 referendums, proposed amendments to the City of Memphis charter that Memphis voters will be deciding.
Actually, Bill, the referendums will not be on the August ballot. They were not published in accordance with the law, so they can't appear in August.
Okay. So did someone miss a deadline, or was that kind of the
I really don't know. I don't know why. It's just one of those things that happened. I'm not really sure if it was by design or accidental, but they will not be on the ballot.
So those questions will be on November's ballot. Is that correct?
I assume so.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the voter registration numbers that I saw. I think you had a new report last month, which is normally when the report comes in, and it shows 593,121 voters in Shelby County. The 2 largest groups by age are 28 to 37-year-olds, followed by 38 to 47-year-olds, then 58 to 67. Voters 18 to 27, still the lowest age bracket between those 18 to 77 years old. So tell me what you make of the numbers, just beyond 27 years old. Are we showing some growth? Are things about where they've always been on that?
We're showing a bit of growth. Not because we're in this, we don't do list maintenance in a even numbered year. So there's a lot of people that are on there that I suspect don't really live there anymore. But I do see some growth in some areas. So we have a precinct or 2 that I'm getting a little nervous about the size of them. So, but yeah, I mean, this age range is, people who are older tend to vote more. And I think if younger voters voted in higher numbers, they'd be more likely to have their issues heard.
Right. Because this report shows who's registered. It doesn't show people who turn out for the elections after they've registered to vote.
Right. It's not.
On early voting over the last few elections, you've seen some changes in voting locations early in election day. People might notice this. You don't use schools anymore as voting locations, right?
That's right. The Tennessee legislature, in their attempt to make schools more secure, rendered them incompatible with voting. So we've moved out of all of the schools that we were in. We've even moved out of some churches that had some schools. So we're no longer using those as polling places either. At the next commission meeting, there will be a few more changes. Some of the churches that we didn't realize had schools turned out to have schools, so we're moving those.
Okay. And some of the locations are forbidding any campaigning on the grounds, regardless of where the 100-foot marker may be. And that's kind of a thing that you've said it is up to the property owners in that case, right?
That's correct. The property owners don't lose their private property rights just because they're a polling place. And it is up to them as to what they will be willing to have. And, some voters like to converse with the folks that are out campaigning, and many voters don't want to. I got a couple of phone calls when we first started using the Tennessee Shakespeare facility, which does not permit campaigning or signs of any kind. I got a couple of calls telling me how much they liked the experience from voters. And I just thought, that's like the first time in recorded history I've heard from a voter that liked a polling place.
Right. Because it is something that is kind of unique to Memphis politics, that you have a lot of campaigns who will invest a lot of money in hand-to-hand campaigning. So, people who stay outside of the 100-foot marker at the early voting sites in particular, specifically to hand people an endorsement ballot or some campaign literature, or it might be the candidate themselves who are there. And that's a big part of a lot of campaign strategies here.
It is. It's kind of unique to Memphis. You don't see that much in other places that I've worked. I mean, you'll have occasionally you'll have some people outside the door or the 100-foot line, but not to the level that we do it in Memphis.
Mm-hmm. The Election Commission is doing what amounts to a school or workshop for people who are considering running for office. Tell me what's covered in those classes and what has the response been like?
Well, we've had good attendance at the ones we've done in the past. What we cover in those classes are basically what you have to do to become a candidate, what your obligations are under campaign finance, how to get a petition, what to do with the petition when you have it, tips on gathering signatures, and then, as I said, we do talk somewhat about campaign finance. That's not a detailed campaign finance class. We do have a very detailed campaign finance class, and which I do encourage all candidates and their treasurers to take.
But this is more kind of a general thing of here are the steps you need to take to get on the ballot, and then sort out your campaign finances after that.
Right.
Things like if you're gathering signatures, don't get just 25 on there. 25 is what you have to have, but
go for 50. That's going to be your minimum.
Right. Because the Election Commission does check those names to see that they are registered voters within that district or within the area that is covered by the office there. So you don't want to be looking for an extra, 10 or so signatures at the deadline to file.
A large number of people who sign petitions don't know where they're registered to vote. So they may be a registered voter, but not at the address they've listed on the petition. So that signature cannot be counted. So, we always tell candidates, and get at 25 to 50 extra signatures and turn it in at least a week before the deadline so that if you don't have enough signatures, you can go out and get more.
Right. And the Election Commission does this across the board. You don't do it for just one campaign, but if a candidate does turn in their signatures early and they come up short, your staff notifies them and says, hey, you came up short on this.
We do. And that's why I really always encourage candidates file early, because then you have time to fix things.
All right. Okay. So a final point here. We are a few years from a time when the pandemic was changing some voting habits. Absentee voting became enormously more important than perhaps it had been in past elections, and we saw some court actions over deadlines and things like that. Where are we now, all of these years later, after that pandemic and its impact on the 2020 elections? Have things kind of settled down to where they were before that?
They have. I've noticed a small increase in voters that vote absentee, but it's not huge. Most voters have gone back to voting in person. That they've discovered is that the absentee process, because you can't drop off ballots in Tennessee, they have to be mailed. The Postal Service is the weak link there. So every year we get ballots that were mailed well in advance of Election Day. We get them after the election. So I do encourage voters to vote in person if they can.
Right, because the deadline to cast your absentee ballot, I believe, is when the polls close on election day. Is that
That's
right?
correct, yes. I have to
Right.
receive the ballot from the mail by the post office by 7 p.m.
Right, right. But if someone says, "Oh, great, it's election day, I'll vote my absentee ballot," and drop it off at the election commission, you can't do that by
No,
state
you
law.
cannot do that. If somebody has asked for an absentee ballot, the only way they can vote in person is to vote a provisional ballot. And then if we've not received the absentee ballot, we'll count the provisional ballot. But if we got the absentee ballot, then the provisional ballot is not counted.
Mm-hmm. All right. With that, we will leave it there for the moment. We have been talking with Shelby County Elections Administrator Linda Phillips about the upcoming August elections. August 1st is Election Day. Early voting is July 12th through July the 27th. I'm Bill Dries, and this has been On the Record.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.